Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning
Mr.
to you.
Secretary. Let me begin by saying, as Chairman of the House Children and Youth Committee, you've been before us, but we would invite you back anytime. And hopefully by the time you come back, we will have a lot to talk about that you referred to. I recognize that...
Anytime, Representative.
Okay, and I recognize that sadly, in a lot of ways, you're in the position where I call it the doctors without borders, in that, in what has become almost my words, but this war-type environment and things, I'm not a believer in collateral damage, and I look at some of the Department of Human Services budget in blue line, and what I see before me is collateral damage. I have communicated that and that phrase directly to the administration. I recognize that you don't have a lot to say about that. Sadly, neither do I. I think Chairman Adolph led off the right way in saying this is something that just we have to stop, and we need to get back to the business of taking care of those who need our help, who absolutely need it. In that vein, then, counties are really caught in the middle. I think of perhaps Representative Greiner and I have a lot in common when we talk about counties. At one point, I was a part of county government, too. So I have a fondness there. And I come from a county that has done very well in managing its affairs, but even that well-managed good county is experiencing a lot of trouble. If they are, with their larger tax base and all of that, I really worry about the rest of the counties throughout the state, many of which are small, some of which are rural, and how they can even begin to manage. They have a fundamental responsibility under law, both state and federal, to provide services for what I would particularly care about, protecting abused, neglected, delinquent children, as you well know. But efforts to enhance, and you referred to that in discussing your answer with Representative Conklin, enhance their staff recruitment and the retention. It's imperative if counties are to maintain this stable and well-prepared workforce, which in today's times I think is particularly needed. Caseworkers are under extreme pressure for when they walk into a situation. What do they do? How do they help this child? What's the best way? What services are available? Does it depend on where you live, what services are available? I believe in your budget you are proposing an increase, as I looked at it, to the county child welfare needs-based budget for 16-17. Would you please talk about that a little bit in specific detail, why and how this request is made? And I understand I'm not a person that wants to pay a little more. I want to squeeze every penny out of that dollar. But I understand the value and what's been going on here. And in some ways, what our committee and this legislature has done, that you need to have a little more money. I understand that, because we've put more responsibility. But could you explain it and draw the parallel between the dollars and the services? Thank you.
Sure. So I think you're correct. It's a little under $32 million that's being requested for the child needs-based budget. As you're aware, the needs-based budget is a process where the counties go propose and tell us what their needs are for child welfare, staffing costs, all those things are allowable costs as part of the needs-based budget. I agree with you. We need to make sure we have a stable, well-trained workforce. There's some of that there. A lot of what's driving the increase is actually the opioid crisis. So if you look at the need and how governments, county governments across the Commonwealth are dealing with the opioid crisis. There was actually an excellent article, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, said that an echo of the opioid crisis that we have now is the children of family members who are addicted to opioids. Now, it's not always the answer that you take those kids into care, but sometimes it is. And I think when you see some of the increases in the caseload, you see some of the changes that are hitting the system, a lot of that is the reverberation of the opioid crisis. So as we're hopefully making some progress there. We hope to make some progress on the children who are affected by that, but it's going to require a lot of work. It's going to require, at the county level and at the state level, folks who do behavioral health, folks who do drug and alcohol, folks who do child welfare, all of them to work at a level that they may not be used to. This is a new challenge, and I think that a lot of what you're seeing in there is the growth in the caseload, the impact of that drug and alcohol crisis, and the impact it's having on families across Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman Adolph, may I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, well, you try to be polite. Mr. Secretary, you bring up the point in looking, and certainly this is not all the children who end up having to be taken out of the home that they're used to, but many of these children also, we have the advantage that grandparents will step up or have other family members to take these children because they really can't live in the environment that a parent is providing. What are we, and I hope that we will work together, but do you have thoughts on what we can do? Because it is my understanding, and indeed we had a hearing on this, that grandparents really don't even end up in the same category as a foster parent in terms of any kind of subsidy or help. And yet, grandparents are older when they admit their age, and even if they have been able to plan successfully for a retirement income was never designed to raise a family. And I will always remember a very lovely 80-year-old woman I met who had a 17-year-old granddaughter she'd been raising since the child was a little under 2. And she was talking to me about, she couldn't get a job. But she needed extra money because it wasn't enough, and I believe the granddaughter wanted cheerleading, which would require extra money for uniforms, this and that, and the child couldn't participate because the grandmother couldn't afford it. So what I know is they do us a great service, and yet we're not giving them help. How are we going to do something for those folks?
So first, I think I would say that when you talk about kin placements or grandparents, those are things that are very important. As you know, when you're forced to take a child out of that home, there's all kinds of trauma you inflict on that child. You can have the trauma of the abuse or neglect that led them to be taken from their home, but also the trauma of being taken from the only parents they know. In a lot of cases, kin placements, whether it's a cousin, whether it's a grandmother, helps ease that secondary trauma that can be so difficult to deal with. So it's an important part of our system. I think that it's an area where we can work together to try to increase that. It's going to take resources. It's going to take money. In a lot of cases, if we're forward thinking about it, placing a child with grandma will wind up costing less than putting them in a group home or in congregate care. And I think that there are opportunities there. I think there's some rules along the way that prevent us from maybe going where you want to go, but I'm committed to working with you to try to find ways to encourage the use of kinship care.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.